How was the transition? Was from a war material into a
Hmm.
farming material? Wild.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of like one of the, I mean, that World War I, World War II, and Vietnam are like three of the most
Yeah.
shocking moments on the schedule because, I'll jump ahead for a second. Like World War II, the insecticides that were developed for the gas chambers in the Nazi concentration camps are the insecticides that immediately became used throughout the agricultural industry.
Hmm.
And like the factories to produce them, they were created for the one purpose and then they were utilized for the second. It's like these fucking these
Yeah.
things associated with death and war were immediately pivoted and became the things that are supposed to provide us sustenance, life, nourishment, all this stuff. So how could that even be? Only through all the various different types of disconnects that we've already walked through on this timeline,
Yeah.
So
Birthed from hate. Wild.
It's wild to think about. Okay, that invention, technology, food source, or maybe not source, but food technology is sort of imprinted with what we know about biogeometry and biodynamics now. Like it's imprinted with the consciousness of the grower. And so if something is created with death in mind, why would we, how are we not just dropping dead when we pop an Oreo into our mouth? Like
Slowly we
with
are.
that, I know, seriously, but like that consciousness is imprinted. Like I'm proud of us as humans that we've lasted this long with this kind of imprint on just surrounding us everywhere.
totally, totally, yeah. And I mean, like my brother and I talk about this kind of stuff, but it's not something that is on most people's radar. And even hearing about it would make them think that we're probably just kind of stupid
Yeah.
to think like that. But it's like we talk about like the homeopathic and energetic imprints of pharmaceuticals and other things in tap water, for example. Like
Mm-hmm.
even though the water has been filtered by the city or whatever it is, just stuff that's sort of in the watershed, in the ecosystem. And so, I mean, one of the most obvious examples is cannabis, like cannabis that was grown out of soil in pots indoors out of the sun and moon under artificial lights with artificial growth stimulants. And people are like, I feel really buzzy and paranoid when I smoke cannabis.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. No,
Right.
no shit,
Did you
Sherlock.
do the
So,
first
so
nine things I said? You got to go really out of your way. Like people like
yeah.
Ryan Sprague and
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just had
this
him on.
Yeah.
this place in Washington, Clickitat, Washington, called Titan Farm.
Oh, nice.
Um,
That's up in our home area.
Oh, cool. Yeah, you got to go really out of your way to find people who can grow. In Washington, he can grow outdoors and in those types of greenhouses. But in like Massachusetts or New York, for example, there's a lot of people who might be in year-round greenhouses. So, anyways, you got to go every step away you take from just totally like nature, like let's just even say the wild. Like our farm, a biodynamic, super regenerative farm, it's still not a wild, right? That's the wild is where the superfoods, our most nutrient dense things, come from because they're
Mm.
just not they're not denatured in any way.
Yeah.
So a farm, we are denaturing it in a way. It is artificial, even though we're trying to mimic natural cycles the best we can. So the more you get away from it, indoors is pretty far away. The more you have to make up for the fact that you did that. And that's kind of the same for humans. Like a human who lives in New York City has to go more out of their way to be centered and balanced and grounded than a person who lives in a forest. So basically, the 1900s is kind of bananas because we get the artificial stuff, but at the same decade, a decade later, society is booming, the roaring 20s, right? And post-war 1900s. And so Steiner speaks in 1924. 1938, the first biodynamic book comes out. So that's the kind of span of incubation period of like, we spoke in a room to 100 people. They went back to their 85 farms or whatever it was, practiced biodynamics, sent that information back to Switzerland, to the Goetheneum, which was their headquarters and university community, and iterated, blah, 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 boom. Steiner actually died, by the way, a few months after he gave these speeches.
Oh wow.
So unlike Waldorf education, eurythmy, these other things, and unlike the theological aspects of anthroposophy, which he spoke about for almost 15 years, 6,000 some odd lectures and like 200 some odd books or whatever, biodynamics, he spoke about, got very severely ill, withdrew from public discourse, and passed away. So nobody had him really to go back to, right? So it was the seed that he planted, if anything. And so over the next decade, incubation period, his lieutenants and down the line, people step in and start formulating these ideas. But already by 1928, we have Demeter, which is biodynamics certifying organization, the first post-war, post-industrial, post-colonialism, regenerative, you could say organic certification body, 1928. Think about it, organic is 1990, so we're in 1928. So the entire organic regenerative arc is underpinned by the biodynamic arc in my observation, in my study. So the 1930s, we went from the roaring 20s to the dirty 30s. The dirty 30s is the Dust Bowl. That's what it is. There's literally dust landing in New York City from like Ohio. And this is from the last 30 years of the invention of chemical fertilizers and increased mechanization, increased soil tillage, making monoculture agriculture, all the things we talked about up until this point. Less and less people farming more and more machined land for like lower quality nutrient, higher, calorie. Everything we set up until now, point, boom, Dust Bowl. You could have predicted it as a layperson just from hearing the story, right?
Yeah.
So same time, Weston A. Price observing nutrient deficiencies in dental records, and indigenous people all around the world don't have it. Like, this information is coming out. The government, on the other hand, starts saying we need to fortify bread and other stuff like that because of the nutrient deficiencies that they're obviously also aware of. So now we start putting in vitamins and shit like that into common household goods. Just to flash forward on that track, like the 50s, the 60s, like we're now getting microwaves, fast food restaurants, all that kind of stuff. The 70s, the US dietary guidelines, I think of 1977, are basically recommending, due to the obesity, we should start eating processed low-fat foods. That would be like the best option for us, which growing up in the 80s and 90s, I had the benefit of being raised on their guidance, because my parents, the food pyramid, all these things, right?
Yeah.
Betty
Crocker. Yeah.
Spray butter, 0 calories.
Oh my God, the amount of margarine that my body was made out of in the late 90s. Yeah. Unbelievable. Tubs of margarine and egg beaters and snack wells. I could go on, dropping bread.